I think that many of my generation remember George C. Scott for his portrayal of General Patton, or as the bad guy in the movie Firestarter, or as Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. I am kind of shameless when it comes to my fanboy self where George C. Scott is concerned. He is one of the few actors of that time span that are just simply timeless. I have always felt that his characters had a sense of realism, as if he was that person you saw in the movies or on the TV series. It is my honor to present the story of one of Hollywood's most controversial actors, George C. Scott. Special note: all of the pictures found in the first section of George C. Scott's story is found in the Appalachian Quarterly. The source information is in the description box. All aboard the Kentucky Tennessee Living Time Machine as it is preparing to depart into the story of one of our outstanding Appalachian Americans, George C. Scott. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine for our flight back in time, but it convinces the YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger vehicle to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. Early life. The younger of two children, George Campbell Scott was born on a kitchen table in West Virginia on October 18, 1927. His father was George Dewey Scott, 1902 to 1988, and his mother was Helena or Lena Agnes, nee Slimp, 1904 to 1935. George C. Scott's sibling was named Helen Scott, who married a Hamilton. There used to be a sign where he was born, but I have not seen it in the recent years. I hope they replace it. Helena, or Helena, was the first cousin, once removed, of the Republican Congressman C. Boscombe Slimp. Her father was a Wise County judge, Campbell Slimp. The family moved from West Virginia to somewhere near Detroit, possibly Pontiac, Michigan, where Scott's father would become an executive at Buick. Helena, or Helena, would die shortly before George's 8th birthday. After the death of Helena, Scott was raised by his father. In 1961, George Dewey Scott was involved in a documentary called Project Hope for XLO Corporation in Detroit. This project won an Academy Award. While attending high school at Redford High School in Detroit, Scott had dreams of becoming an author like his favorite writer, F. Scott Fitzgerald. While George was never published, he did write several short stories and tried to write a novel, but he was never satisfied with it, and so it was never completed. Military service. After high school graduation, Scott enlisted with the United States Marine Corps, serving from 1945 to 1949. While there, Scott served as an honor guard at the military funerals at Arlington National Cemetery and was assigned to the 8th and I Barracks in Washington, D.C. It seems that during this time in Washington, D.C., that Scott picked up his drinking habit, and it stayed with him for the rest of his life. He would become infamous for his drinking and brawling as his nose was broken 5 times over his life from fights. According to the source written by the LA Times, Scott would say of this time in the Marines, quote, "You can't look at that many widows in veils and hear that many taps without taking a drink," unquote. He would achieve the rank of sergeant before leaving the Marines. College Theater. Following military service, Scott enrolled in the University of Missouri on the GI Bill, where he majored in journalism and then became interested in drama. He graduated in 1953 with degrees in English and theater. This fact would become important as in the 1970s, Scott would return to West Virginia to the Clinch Valley College, later known as the University of Virginia's College at Wise, to establish a scholarship. He would donate his grandfather's home to raise money for the scholarship. When Joe Smitty, the chancellor at the CVC College, then asked if he wanted the money to go for a drama scholarship, Scott refused and said he was a journalism major and wanted the scholarship for those students. He also refused for the scholarship to be named after him. The scholarship is known as the Campbell Slimp Scholarship Fund. While at the university, Scott would appear on stage. His first public appearance came when he played a barrister in the production of Terence Rattigan's The Winslow Boy, directed by H. Donovan Reisenberger. While rehearsals for The Winslow Boy was taking place, he made his first stage presence known in the student production of Noel Coward's Hands Across the Sea, directed by Jerry V. Tobias. Scott acknowledged a child born out of wedlock during his school years, but the name and date of the birth are unknown at this time. Personal relationships in the 1950s. During the early 1950s, it seems that Scott supported himself by taking several unskilled jobs and appearing in small roles in television and in the repertory theater. George married Carolyn Hughes in 1951. During this marriage, Victoria Scott was born on December 19th, 1952. Their marriage, it seems, was not a happy one as they divorced in 1955. George was not faithful in his marriage. In 1954, Scott had a daughter, Michelle Truesdale Scott, with Karen Truesdale. It is unclear if the birth of the child had to do with the eventual breakup of the marriage, or if Scott publicly recognized her birth at that time. George C. Scott did not stay single for very long. As the same year that his divorce was final from Hughes, he would marry Patricia Reed. Patricia was a former folk singer, actress, and even a political appointee. Reed would head the New York office of film and television production. During the union of the pair, the birth of a son, Matthew Scott, born May 27, 1957, and a daughter, Devon Scott, born November 29, 1958, would take place. Scott and Reed would remain married until 1960. Scott's first acting roles. In 1957, Scott was working as an IBM machine operator and considered himself a failure as a successful actor. But it seems that fate had other plans. That same year, as a part of Joseph Papp's New York Shakespeare's Festival, Scott was cast in Joe Papp's production of Shakespeare's Richard III. It became a critical success, with Scott being highly praised for his title role. One New York critic was so impressed by his performance that, according to the source, Encyclopedia Britannica, he is quoted as describing Scott's performance as, quote, the meanest Richard III ever seen by human eyes, unquote. This performance opened doors for Scott as he was able to parlay his success into having quality roles in off-Broadway and Broadway productions for the next 2 years. In 1957, Scott would make his first film debut playing George Crabbe in the western named The Hanging Tree. He would also star as Claude Dancer in the film Otto Preminger's Anatomy of a Murder, and be nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for his portrayal of the assistant prosecutor. His performance was so riveting in the movie that many critics felt that Scott stole many scenes from James Stewart by simply doing nothing but sitting in a chair and following scenes with the action in his eyes. Even though Anatomy of a Murder would give him great acclaim, he would refuse the nomination for the Oscar. In 1958, Scott made his first of many appearances with his future wife, Colleen Dewhurst, in the production of Children of Darkness. That same year, the pair would also star in the production of As You Like It. Scott would win the Obie Award for these performances. Scott would also win an Obie Award that year for his performance as Richard III. That same year, Scott made his Broadway debut in the short-run production of Comes a Day. He also appeared for his television debut in the adaptation of The Tale of Two Cities for the DuPont Show of the Month, directed by Robert Mulligan. He was also cast in the television version of The Outcasts of Poker Flat. He also appeared in 2 episodes of Craft Theater as characters John Oakhurst and Nicholas Dreidel. He also appeared in the omnibus production The Empty Chair as character Maximilian Robespierre. In 1959, Scott would once again appear on Broadway in the play The Andersonville Trial by Saul Levitt, directed by Jose Ferrer. Scott would win huge critical acclaim for his portrayal of the prosecutor. This play was based on the military trial of the infamous Civil War prison camp in Andersonville, Georgia. It ran for 179 performances from December 1959 to June 1960. Also, that same year, Scott would appear in the United States Steel Hour as Marshall Gulliver in the episode Trap for a Stranger. Then again, Scott would appear in the Sunday Showcase as Dr. Richard Bryan in the episode People Kill People Sometimes. Scott would also appear in the Playhouse 90 as Juan de la Torre in the episode Target for Three. And finally, Scott would appear in the television film named Winterset as the character Troc Estrella. Personal life in the 1960s. The 1960s were very eventful for George C. Scott. In 1960, his marriage to Patricia Reed would end. Once again, Scott would not remain single long. That same year, he would marry Colleen Dewhurst, who was a Canadian-born actress. Dewhurst was an accomplished actress in her own right. She appeared in many plays, television shows, and the movies. She won 2 Tony Awards for her work in All the Way Home in 1961 and again in 1974 for her work in A Moon for the Misbegotten. During this union, son Alexander Scott was born August 1960, and son Campbell Scott was born July 19, 1961. Campbell would be the final child born to George C. Scott. It seems that Scott and Dewhurst's relationship was a rocky one. Again, Scott was not known to be faithful. The couple divorced in 1965. In 1966, during the filming of the Bible, Scott is said to have had an affair with Ava Gardner. He and Dewhurst remarried on July 4th, 1967. But the couple divorced for a second time on February 2nd, 1972. Oddly enough, it seems that Colleen died the very same day. Acting in the 1960s. During this time period in Scott's life, he would appear on many television shows and Broadway plays. However, he would continue to make one big screen Hollywood film a year. In 1961, Scott would again appear on the big screen in the movie The Hustler. He would be nominated again for an Oscar for his role as Bert Gordon, a gambler. This would be the second, but not the last time that Scott would refuse an Oscar nomination, as he felt that acting was not a competition to be won. That to do so would demean the industry as a whole, as it should not be a popularity contest. It is unclear if this refusal had anything to do with Scott's Oscar snubs, but it would not be until 1964 that Scott would once again be nominated for an Oscar. However, that same year, Scott was nominated for a Golden Globe Award for Best Supporting Actor in a Motion Picture for his portrayal of Bert Gordon in The Hustler. He was also nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Drama Series for his portrayal of Dr. Carl Anders in the series Ben Casey in the episode I Remember a Lemon Tree. Scott did not turn down these nominations. From 1960 through 1961, Scott received good reviews for his theater work for The Wall, which ran for 167 performances. During that time, he guest starred on episodes of Sunday Showcase, Playhouse 90, Play of the Week, playing Don Juan in Hell, Dow Hour of Great Mysteries, and Hallmark Hall of Fame production of Winterset, which was originally written for the stage. He was in great demand for guest appearances in television shows, as he often appeared in episodes of Ben Casey and Naked City. He also appeared in Graham Greene's The Power and the Glory in a television production. In 1962, Scott tipped his toe in the directorial pond. He returned to Broadway to direct the two performances lived, General Seeger by Ira Levin. Scott was also in the play Great Day in the Morning, which was directed by Jose Quintero, but this play also had a short run. Now, just a reminder to everyone, this is all before his huge breakthrough roles appeared. While Scott was becoming a household name in his acting career and being sought after as a guest on many series, Scott still had not landed the roles that would shape his future career. George C. Scott's Big Break. In 1963, Scott landed his first leading role in a feature called The List of Adrian Messenger. That same year, he would star as the character Neil Brock in an hour-long television series named The East Side, West Side. This is the first time that Scott's infamous difficult personality is recorded. Scott was a huge creative influence on the show, which often led to heated conflicts with James T. Aubrey, the head of CBS. Even though the show only ran for one season due to advertising difficulties and limited distribution, the program won an Emmy. Scott himself was nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series for his portrayal of Neil Brock in East Side, West Side. During this same time, Scott was seeing success in an off-Broadway production of Desire Under the Elms. In 1964, Scott would land his highest profile role at that time. He played General Buck Turgison in Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, directed by Stanley Kubrick. This character is beloved by many people to this day, as his over-the-top camp portrayal of the warmongering general is simply delicious. Some people view this as his future template for his work in General Patton. Dr. Strangelove is often seen as Scott's breakthrough role. That same year, Scott would star in The Yellow Rolls Royce. In 1966, Scott would be cast in 20th Century Fox released Dino De Laurentiis' The Bible in the Beginning, directed by John Huston. He also appeared as Judd Barker in NBC Western named The Road West, also known as The Savage Land. Scott guest starred in a special Bob Hope Presents the Chrysler Theater. He also co-starred with Tony Curtis in the comedy Not With My Wife, You Don't. In 1967, Scott starred in the television version of The Crucible as John Proctor. For this role, Scott was once again nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Miniseries or a Movie. He returned to direct on Broadway again with the play Dr. Cook's Garden by Ira Levin. However, this did not last through the tryouts, as Scott became frustrated and quit. Instead, Scott returned to acting and appeared in a revival of The Little Foxes directed by Mike Nichols, which ran for 100 performances from 1967 to 1968. During this time, he starred in the 1967 film The Flim Flam Man and starred in the 1968 film Petula. Scott was nominated for a New York Film Critics Circle Award for Best Actor in his portrayal of Dr. Archie Bolan in Petula. Both of these films are considered to be some of Scott's finest work in the 1960s. Scott also appeared in the made-for-television film Mirror, Mirror Off the Wall in 1969. In 1968, Scott had a big Broadway hit with Neil Simon's Plaza Suite, which was directed by Mike Nichols. Each act was a separate one-act play, with Scott playing a different lead character in each act. It ran for 1,097 performances. George C. Scott during the 1970s. George Campbell Scott married American actress Trish Van Devere on September 4, 1972, and remained married to her until his death on September 22, 1999. Scott adopted Van Deer's nephew, George Dressel. In 1970, Scott appeared in the made-for-television film Jane Eyre. For his role as Edward Rochester, Scott won and accepted the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Miniseries or Movie. He also once again sat down in the director's chair for a televised version of the Andersonville trial. This was also the year that George Campbell Scott took on the role that would forever change his career. He played none other than General Patton in the film simply called Patton. Scott threw himself into the role by researching the general, talked to people who knew him personally, and studied films of the man himself. Scott is so convincing as the general that many people cannot view General Patton as anything but George C. Scott's portrayal of him. There was a huge hullabaloo over Scott's refusal to accept the Academy Award for his role. He simply told them, "No thanks." While Scott had never accepted an award or a nomination from the Academy before or after this point, this one seemed to really rock the boat in the press. Even in the press releases about his death, this one event is often mentioned. However, George did accept the New York Film Critics Award for Lead Actor in a Film Award for his portrayal. In 1971, Scott returned to acting in feature films. He starred in the made-for-television film version of the Arthur Miller play, The Price. He appeared in the feature films They May Be Giants and The Last Run for director Richard Fleischer. Scott had a big hit with The Hospital. For these films, Scott would receive several nominations. The Hallmark Hall of Fame Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Miniseries or Movie for his portrayal of Victor France in the play The Price. The BAFTA Award for Best Actor in a Leading Role for his portrayal of Justin Playfair, based on Sherlock Holmes in They Might Be Giants. And for his portrayal of Dr. Herbert Brock in The Hospital, he would receive awards and nominations. They were the Academy Award for Best Actor, nomination for the BAFTA Award for Best Actor in a Leading Role, nomination for a Golden Globe Award for Best Actor Motion Picture Drama. Once again, Scott would turn down the Academy Award. The Academy chose to give the award to Scott because of his talent, even though this went against his expressed wishes. In 1972, Scott would appear in The New Centurions, directed by Fleischer, based on the book by Joseph Wambaugh. Then it seems that Scott had a series of box office flops. It began with the film Rage, which Scott both directed and starred in. Then there were the 1973 films Oklahoma Crude, directed by Stanley Kramer, The Day of the Dolphin, directed by Mike Nichols. The streak continued in 1974 with the films Bank Shot, directed by Gower Champion, and The Savage is Loose, which Scott himself directed. In 1975, Scott tried to break the streak. He returned to television with Fear on Trial and starred in the disaster film The Hindenburg for director Robert Weiss. Scott again directed a production called All God's Children Got Wings, which had a very short run. But not everything that Scott touched after Patton and The Hospital was a failure. In 1973, Scott starred in a revival of Uncle Vanya, portraying Mikhail Ostrov, directed by Mike Nichols, for which he won a Tony Award. The show ran for 65 performances. He directed and played Willie Loman in the 1975 revival of Death of a Salesman, for which he garnered another Tony nomination. In 1976, he then starred in the very well-received production of Larry Gilbert's Sly Fox, based on Ben Jonson's Volpone, which ran 495 performances. In 1976, Scott starred in a television production of The Beauty and the Beast. He was nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Miniseries or a Movie for his portrayal of the Beast. In 1977, he starred in Ernest Hemingway-based artist in Islands in the Stream, directed by Schaefer and based on Hemingway's posthumously published novel. In Cross Swords, directed by Fleischer, Scott had a cameo. In 1978, Scott scored the lead role in the film Movie, directed by Stanley Doan. For his portrayal of Gloves Malloy, Spats Baxter, in Movie, Scott would once again be nominated for a Golden Globe Award for Best Actor. And in 1979, Scott co-starred in the movie Hardcore, written and directed by Paul Schrader. George C. Scott in the 1980s. On a personal level, George Campbell Scott began showing signs of ill health. It was during the 1980s that he would suffer a series of heart attacks. In 1980, Scott starred in The Changeling, playing as John Russell, for which he received the Canadian Genie Award for Best Foreign Film Actor for his performance. He also won the Fanda Festival Award for Best Actor for this film. His next film was The Formula, which he played Lieutenant Barney Kane. The film was a flop. This would be the last time that he had a lead in a major studio feature film. Scott returned to Broadway for Tricks of the Trade, in which he played Dr. Augustus Browning. It ran for a single performance. In 1981, Scott would co-star with Timothy Hutton and rising stars Sean Penn and Tom Cruise. His role was Brigadier General Harlan Bach for the movie Taps. In 1982, Scott was cast as Fagin in the made-for-television film of Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. Returning to Broadway, Scott directed and starred as Gary Essedine in the play Present Laughter, which ran during the 1982 through 1983 season. Also that year, Scott would appear in the campaign commercial for Republican U.S. Senator Lowell Wicker of Connecticut. Scott was a moderate Republican and identified with Wicker's views concerning the death penalty. In 1983, George C. Scott starred in a television film as Burton Allen in China Rose. In 1984, Scott had a supporting role as John Rainbird in the adaptation of Stephen King's novel Firestarter. In my opinion, his role was outstanding as a would-be assassin. While not as well written as his other roles, he still did a fantastic job as the movie's villain. That same year, Scott would play in his next well-received role as Ebenezer Scrooge in the television movie A Christmas Carol. For this role, Scott would be nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Miniseries or a Movie. Scott once again sat down in the director's chair for Broadway revival of Noel Coward's Design for Living, which was successful because it had a run of 245 performances. In 1985, Scott would play Benito Mussolini for the made-for-television film Mussolini, The Untold Story. In 1986, Scott would play Evan Granger for the made-for-television film Choices. He would also revisit his role as General George S. Patton Jr. for the made-for-television film The Last Days of Patton. And the last made-for-television film that he would star in would be Edgar Allan Poe's The Murders in the Rue Morgue as C. Augustine Dupin. On Broadway, Scott would play Henry Finnegan in the play The Boys in the Autumn. In 1987, Scott appeared in Pals. He also played the lead role in the TV series Mr. President as President Samuel Arthur Trix. The series had 27 episodes and ran from 1987 through 1988. Scott also appeared on The Johnny Carson Show in March 1987. In 1989, Scott starred in the television film The Ryan White Story as Charles Vaughn, the lawyer defending Ryan White. George Campbell Scott in the 1990s. In 1990, Scott would lend his voice to Bring Life Smoke in a direct-to-video film called Cartoon All-Stars to the Rescue. Also that year, he would lend his voice once again to the animated film The Rescuers Down Under as Percival McLeach. He would appear in the movie The Exorcist 3 as Lieutenant William F. Kinderman. He would also appear on television in the film Descending Angel as Florence Stroa. In 1991, Scott would appear on the small screen once again playing Max Middleman in the television film Finding the Way Home. And on Broadway, Scott could be seen playing Julian Northrup and Grandpa Paul Osborne in the play On Borrowed Time. In 1993, Scott starred in the off-Broadway play Wrong Turn at Lungfish. He was nominated for an Emmy Award for his performance. During this time, he had a supporting role in Caraco, which he played the character Cornelius Withering, and Malice, which he played the character Martin Kessler. In 1994, Scott had a starring role as Joe Trapcheck in the series Traps, but it only ran for 5 episodes. He also starred in the made-for-television film The Prince Brat and the Whipping Boy, or sometimes seen as the Whipping Boy, playing George Blind George. He also starred in the TV movie A Matter of Justice as a 2-episode story arc for the heat of the night. He would also star as Grandpa Ivan Bethune in the movie Angus. In 1995, Scott would play Constantine Cuss D'Amato in the theatrical film Tyson. Scott would have a semi-regular role as Ollie Herman on the television series New York Times. But this series was short-lived as it only had 3 episodes. In 1996, Scott would give his final Broadway performance as Henry Drummond in the play Inherit the Wind. Because of illness, Scott had to miss many performances which were taken over by Tony Randall. This year, he also received an honorary Drama Desk Award for a lifetime devotion to theater. Scott was able to appear on television as Clayton Hayes in Country Justice. That year, he also played Captain Edward J. Smith in the television miniseries Titanic. He was also in the television film The Searchers. In 1997, in the television film 12 Angry Men, Scott played Jurors Number 3. The role was formerly played by Lee J. Cobb in the 1957 film. For this role, Scott received the Cable Ace Award for Best Supporting Actor in a Movie or Miniseries, the Golden Globe Award for Best Supporting Actor, Series, Miniseries, or Television Film, and the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Miniseries or a Movie, and was nominated for the Screen Actors Guild Award for Outstanding Performance by a Male Actor in a Miniseries or a Television Movie. That year, Scott hosted Weapons at War on A&E TV. But because of poor health, he had to be replaced after one season by Gerald McRaney. The series was moved to the History Channel, and Scott was still credited as host for the first season. Robert Conrad replaced Scott after his death in 1999. In 1999, Scott's final theatrical films were Gloria, in which he had a supporting role of Reuben or Ruby. He also had a supporting role in the film Rocky Marciano. And his final film was Inherit the Wind, which he played Matthew Harrison Brady. It is interesting that the role he played in the film is opposite the one he played on stage. For this role, Scott would be nominated for the Screen Actors Guild Award for Outstanding Performance by a Male Actor in a Miniseries or Television Movie. George Campbell Scott's death. Sadly, the world could not keep the brilliant actor known as George C. Scott. He was infamous for his bad temper, being moody, and downright cantankerous on sets. He was very creative, and also set in his ways, as he was willing to fight for what he felt was the right way to do things. And that is just how George was. He had a gruff exterior and kept everyone at arm's length. This is a true characteristic of the Appalachian people. But, according to the accounts of his family back home in Virginia, he was also warm, kind, and a comedian to those he let into his personal circle. And it is perhaps because of Scott's commanding presence and ill temper that he was able to turn out such wonderful, gruff characters. But the best way to describe Scott about his reputation came from a quote from Maureen Stapleton on the set of Neil Simon's Plaza Suite. Quote, "I don't know what to do. I'm scared of him," unquote. The director, Mike Nichols, replied, quote, "My dear, everyone is scared of George C. Scott," unquote. And really, it is sort of sad that George C. Scott would forever be remembered as the first actor to turn down the Academy Award. He turned out such great performances as he stuck to his beliefs that acting should never be a competition. And for that, he should be respected in my humble opinion. Scott would be found dead on September 22, 1999. According to the LA Times article, quote, Scott was found in his Westlake Village home by a family friend Wednesday afternoon, according to the Ventura County Coroner's Office. Emergency medical personnel were summoned, and they pronounced him dead at 3:15 p.m. An autopsy performed Thursday showed that he died of a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm, unquote. George C. Scott would be 71 years old at his passing. Scott would be buried at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Westwood, California. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the outstanding Appalachian Americans. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification button. Be sure to double check that you are subscribed, as some of our viewers are finding that they are no longer subscribed to our channel. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.